Thank you for coming. Welcome. I'm so happy to see so many of you here tonight. I see some repeat offenders who have been to some of our other events, and thank you for your support. This is our fifth free, I'll say that again, free speaker event, and we are so excited about it. The Plainfield Parent Community Network Committee consists of myself. My name is Nicole Nepper, and I'm a clinical therapist, and with an office in Oswego, Corey Warden. He is somewhere around here. Corey is a clinical therapist with Plainfield Counseling Center. We have Tim Alvarez. He's Director of Student Services with Plainfield School District. Kathy Bertrand, she's out in the hallway. She's a social worker with Indian Trail. We have Christine Belcastro, social worker with Plainfield East High School. Brian Sorg, principal at Meadowview Elementary. And then we have Jenny Hamby, and she's a District 202 parent and a business owner in the community. So, if any of you have any questions or any ideas that you want to send our way, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter, you can also look at our website, plainfieldparentcommunitynetwork.org. I am so excited to introduce Dr. Laura Koehler. And she's down there getting ready. She's got a lot to pack in this time, so I'm going to go really quick and introduce her to you. Dr. Koehler is a licensed clinical psychologist and clinical supervisor of the Anxiety Services Program at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health. She graduated from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology at Argosy University with a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. She has been working in the mental health field for over 15 years. Her current work is focused on working with adolescents and adults with diagnosis of anxiety, depression, and autism spectrum disorders. Laura's approach to treatment integrates dialectical behavioral therapy, you might hear that called DBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, we call that ACT, exposure therapy to provide patients with skills to increase their ability to regulate anxiety, as well as tolerate overwhelming emotions. Please help me welcome Dr. Koehler.
Thank you all for coming. So, like she said, I work at the anxiety program at Linden Oaks. So you might hear me say we a lot. And so what that we is just like the unit with all of my staff. I'm going to try to save some time at the end for questions. And we'll just go ahead and get started because I do have a lot to go over, if that's okay. Might need help. There we go. All right. So, the anxiety monster, how to turn Godzilla into Pete's dragon. So we use anxiety monster a lot at the anxiety units. So what we're going to do today is that we're going to talk a little bit just about anxiety in general, then about how it shows up in schools, talk a little bit about accommodations, as well as then some skills to practice. So, anxiety. So just a general definition of anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. So anxiety typically is all future-based. So it's typically not things happening in the present. That would typically be fear. So fear of the things that are happening like right now, like there is danger. Anxiety is something that's future-based. So anxiety is a normal emotion. It's a common experience. Every single person has anxiety on the planet. It's meant to help motivate us. It's helpful to protect us. It's warning signs. This is kind of evolutionary-wise why we need anxiety. So at the anxiety program, we'll make a joke sometimes because a lot of times on the first day when patients come to us, their number one goal is for us to get rid of the anxiety. And then our joke is that like we disappoint them from the start because, you know, we're trying to teach them this, you know, that we don't want to get rid of the anxiety, that it's actually very helpful for us. And so there's a lot of education that goes along with that, of why it's necessary, why we need it, why it's helpful. So some common anxiety symptoms. So one of the tricky things about anxiety is that I could bring up 10 people and they would all experience the anxiety different. So someone could get really bad like tension headaches in their neck and shoulder with like migraines. Other people, it could center more like in their throat and feel like their, throat's throwing up or they're choking. Some people can have stomach issues and get belly aches from it, or more like in their limbs and get like tingly in their hands and their arms and their legs. So anxiety can affect us in many different ways, which then can be sometimes why there's a miscommunication or a lack of communication between like parents and kids, is because we experience it so differently that it's like you have no idea what I'm experiencing right now. Because we don't, because I experience different than you experience.
Just gonna go in there.
I'm gonna need it in a little bit. Well, that can just stay right there then. I can work on it from there. So sources of anxiety. So anxiety can come from new situations or transitions. Worrying about being judged or evaluated by others. School anxiety. Concerns about the future, world events, germs, medical health. We see this a lot. So a lot of times there's a, like if there happens to be like a shooting somewhere in the country, we'll see kind of this upswing of patients then because they start to get worried about that. With the new situations or transitions, like this could be going from like grade school to junior high or junior high to high school to college. We'll get a lot of like 18-year-old seniors right now this time of year because they're getting ready to graduate, the thing they've been waiting for 12 years, and now they're like, uh-oh, that came on really fast. Separation from loved ones. We do see a lot of separation anxiety disorders on the anxiety unit, any kind of trauma, fear of having a panic attack, and then like performance anxiety. So that could be anything from academic to, so worrying about like taking tests or speeches to more performing like social-wise, things like that. So there's lots of sources of anxiety. We see all of these on the anxiety unit. So signs, things to look for. So intense physical sensations. So we hear a lot of stomach aches, a lot of headaches. Those are probably the two biggest ones. And something that's sort of a red flag for anxiety is that if the stomach aches or headaches or whatever the physical sensation is happening in the morning, and then the kid stays home from school and they start to feel better, that's a red flag that it was anxiety and not actually something wrong. Because that's usually a pretty big thing that we hear is from the kid as well as from the parents, and I don't know if I'm really sick or not. And so we need to do some investigating and find out if it's lasting all day, find out if it's, is there triggers of like school, the alarm going off, things like that. Staying home or isolating in their bedroom, leaving class, so like making frequent trips to the guidance office, or hiding in like the bathroom we'll hear sometimes. Unwilling to engage in hobbies or extracurricular activities, especially when they're related to school. And so, you might love soccer, but because now we play soccer for school, it can start to like generalize out that, we're anxious at one thing and now anything related to school I'm anxious about. Struggling with like concentration, focus. You might hear things when the child's like home at night doing homework, like I just don't remember anything that I learned in that class. Most likely just because the anxiety is so high sitting in that class that it's more about surviving the moment than it is actually about being able to remember and learn. Seeking reassurance, we see this a lot, like, are you sure it's gonna be okay? Like, how do you know it's gonna be okay? Like, prove to me that it's okay. We'll hear that a lot. Sometimes like repetitive behaviors, they'll start to try to get a sense of control in areas that they don't have it. So you might see them check their backpack for their homework like 8 times, just to make sure that it's in there, things like that. Sleeping difficulties because starting to go to bed at night, they're thinking about, school the next day, or they wake up in the middle of the night thinking about their test or whatever's happening at school. Lack of appetite or overeating, and then constant fidgeting. So if I'm saying that anxiety is a normal reaction and everyone on the planet has it, how do we know then when it becomes a problem, right? So it becomes a problem, especially in dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. So from a DBT and ACT perspective, we're going to say that it becomes a problem when it disrupts daily activities and the quality of life. So somebody can have anxiety, and as long as they continue to live their life, doesn't necessarily mean there's not some issues. But when it actually becomes a significant problem is when it's then interrupting the functioning. So what that means from a DBT and ACT perspective is that it moves away from your values. So the things that are important to you. So kind of like I was saying before, you know, like your kid has always enjoyed certain sports or art, music, playing a musical instrument, and now they're pulling away from doing that. So that's like the friendship. Maybe they are isolating their room so they're not spending as much time with the family. Or any time that you are with family, it's always talking about school. Any kind of like role modeling, education, anything with religion, self-care. So this could be eating, sleeping, showering, moving away from hobbies and interests, anything in the community that they've been a part of and now they're no longer participating in, possibly romantic relationships, and then career for more of those like adults or even like transitioning. The young adults. So that's kind of the overview. Any questions? I know there's a lot of you guys, so I'm worried to ask if there's questions because that's all we can do the whole rest of the time. But any pressing questions? Okay, so that's kind of the overview. So now we're going to kind of jump into DBT as well as talking about that accommodations piece. Because we're seeing this a lot in the anxiety program, which is why I thought I brought it up about the accommodations. So DBT, just to give you a very tiny, quick background on DBT, it was created by Marsha Linehan. She created it to be a multimodal psychosocial treatment approach. So she created it for it to be organized, systematic, it creates structure, and enhances decision-making and problem solving. And so that works great with teenagers, right? Especially when we're looking at transitions back to school. So any kid that's in our program's 5 days a week, for 4 hours a day, and so we have to transition them back into school. So to make it very structured, to have everything kind of set up so that the school, the family, the kid, everybody knows what's happening is really important to us. And Linehan's general goal for DBT is to learn and refine skills in changing behavioral, emotional, and thinking patterns associated with problems in living, that is, those causing misery and distress. So, emotion dysregulation. I'm going to start to draw a little. I'm a very visual person, so I thought I'd do it both ways. So Linehan has kind of 4 main modules with DBT. She has mindfulness, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and then interpersonal effectiveness. We're going to focus on the emotion regulation as well as the distress tolerance piece. So, when we're dysregulated, that's typically when you might think to yourself, like, wow, it feels like my kid just went from like 0 to 100 in like 2.2 seconds, and or the kid is just saying, I don't know, I was fine a second ago, and now I just feel completely overwhelmed and stressed out. That's typically when we're more dysregulated. So with that like second paragraph, visually, the way this would look is that whatever emotion it is too, it doesn't have to just be anxiety. But when someone, even an adult, is dysregulated, the way that it looks is that you're kind of starting out at your baseline, and then when you're dysregulated, you go up really fast on like an emotional scale. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, you go up to that 10 really fast, you stay up there a really long time, and then you take a really long time to come down from it. So that's when someone's dysregulated, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you become dysregulated. But that's kind of the idea. When someone's emotionally dysregulated, their emotions aren't balanced. So in the perfect world, we want to kind of be at that maybe like 1 to 5, if we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10. Like we want to be at a 1 to 5 like all the time, right? And then when we're dysregulated though, we're kind of jumping up high. So let's say we have a lot of anxiety about a test. test to 6 period. We wake up, we're feeling anxious, we go to school, but we're super anxious about this test 6 period, so even during first period, we're jumping up that ladder first period to a high number like 8, 9, 10, and then we're staying there. Maybe this is the test. We're staying there, probably refuse to take the test, we're so anxious we can't take it, and then we stay up there even several periods afterwards. And then we don't actually like kind of come down from that anxiety until maybe like the afternoon. Does that make sense? So this is what we're going to try to, I'm going to talk about skills so this doesn't happen. So what happens is that avoidance then results in a dysregulation and lowers tolerance to distress. So as an individual opts to avoid discomfort, they start to decrease their tolerance level. So, again, visual person. So, the way this visually would look is that, again, we're kind of walking along our lives, we're at like a 0, and then something happens that's anxiety provoking. And so, this is like a 10 on our emotional scales, our ladder is what we call it. So we're walking along, and in order to keep moving to those values that I was talking about before, so that's values, in order to keep moving towards those values, the person needs to get up and over the wave. And so to keep our tolerance high. So if we avoid that, so let's say it's a speech. Let's say a kid says, or an adult even says, you know, I have anxiety, I can manage all of it except with speeches. Speeches is the only thing I can't do. So it makes sense, right, that parents, the kid, the school, everyone would kind of say, okay, well maybe let's take that one off your plate. And now you only have to do speeches with the guidance counselor and one of your friends, and that's it. But what we're doing that we don't always pay attention to is that we're cutting off our tolerance. And we're telling our brains that we can't manage these things, even though our brain thought we could. So then we cut off that level, and our brain creates a new one for ourselves. So it lowers it down, because our brain's like, oh, I thought we had our tolerance high enough to do speeches, but you're telling me that we don't. So let me go ahead and lower that down. So then like this is our new level of tolerance for distress. So yes, technically we're going to our values, but we're cutting part of our values out. And so what that basically happens though is, like, let's say that's an 8. So now what we've done is what feels like a 10 on our ladder is actually an 8. Does that make sense? Because we've lowered our tolerance down. So these things that we used to be able to do are not brought down. So now the things that were an 8 before, so maybe if it was speeches before, maybe now it's like doing group work and talking in front of groups of people, like maybe not in front of them, but just like in little group works. Like that's now a 10 in our ladder because we've lowered our tolerance down. So now I can't do that either, or my anxiety tells me I can't do that. My anxiety monster, Godzilla, tells me that. So now we have now already created a quick connection to if something is uncomfortable or too high, I avoid it and I don't do it. So now comes, you know, I thought it was only speeches, but it's actually group work too that I don't like doing. The last time we just cut that out, so let me just do that again and that'll make me feel better. So now the same thing happens. We cut that off and we don't do the group work anymore. And so now I only do projects by myself. And the same thing happens where we create this new threshold. Our brain's like, you know, I thought I had this figured out, but I don't. Because we lower it down. Because this is what happens. The anxiety monster, way up here, that was telling us all the bad things that would happen if we did a speech, just went ahead and moved on down. So now this anxiety monster is right here. So now the same thing happens. What used to be 6s on our ladder are now 10s, and so on and so on. So do we see how that would work? That we just keep lowering our tolerance level. Until then, we get to the point perhaps where we just stop going to school because it went from speeches to group work to now just raising my hand even in class now is too anxiety provoking, to now just even being in the class because my teacher could call on me at any time. It just can slowly decrease to now we don't want to do anything that could be possibly anxiety provoking. Whoa. I'm not sure where to point it. This one. I don't know what's happening. This is the anxiety monster getting me because I'm talking about it. Am I too far away from it, maybe? No. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one. Back. Yeah, right there. So I kind of already talked about this, but I'm sorry, go back again. Yes. So are accommodations avoided? So the short answer to this is yes. Accommodation, so getting any kind of accommodations at school is avoidance. Particularly if they're quick and like trying to be proactive and we're not even giving the kids a chance to do it on their own. So when the accommodations are too quick or they're over accommodating, it deprives the student of the opportunity to learn how to manage those difficult emotions that if they're in grade school, they're probably going to have to do in junior high. And if they're in junior high, they're going to have to do it in high school. And if they're in high school, they're going to have to do it in college or work. And so it's making it less likely that then they'll be able to manage those situations for themselves in the future. Because in a way, accommodations can sometimes show that it's like proving to them that they can't handle it sometimes. And so oftentimes we're trying to limit the accommodations. So it's not that we say no to accommodations. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, but we want them to be, can you make it go forward? Thank you. So when they're necessary, we want to do like the least amount of accommodations first, and then as the tolerance starts to increase, that's when we want to start pulling it back in there. Whatever the kind of mainstream approach is. So they should be gradually introduced. So if any of your kids have accommodations right now, I don't want them just to be pulled. Like, we need to get it back. So a metaphor that I use sometimes is like if someone was afraid of heights, and we want to get them to like the 100th floor of a building, like we want them to be able to go like 5, 10, 15, 20. We don't want to just jump to like 60 because that's going to be too overwhelming. But at the end of the day, we always want to just try to get back because we don't want to get too stuck on like right now in the sense of, okay, this will get them through this class right now. Because then we're just going to have the same problem the next semester, right? We want to be able to build their tolerance so high that then they're able to do everything in the future. Because a lot of the times the accommodations, that we're getting in school don't follow us to work. And so then if we need to give a speech or, we need to take some sort of like exams, like we have to do that at Linden. Like we have to get this education on stuff and then take exams to prove that we learned it and understood it. Next. So now, how do we improve that emotion regulation? And so what we're looking for, so as an individual becomes more emotionally regulated, then we start to become emotional at a slower rate. So it's not so quick anymore, as well as it's less intense. However, life offers us a surprise sometimes, so we're still going to experience intense emotions sometimes. But hopefully then what will happen is that we'll just kind of experience a high level of anxiety for a short amount of time and then recover quickly. That's what we're looking for, is to recover quickly. So the way that this would look visually is that we're back to this one, right? When we're dysregulated, we shoot up that ladder really fast, we stay up there a long time, and it takes us a long time to come down. The more regulated we are, we start to climb up that ladder slower. And the slower we climb the ladder, it gives us more chances to practice skills, be aware of what's happening, asking for help. So then, hopefully what'll happen is we'll practice something to help us, and that'll kind of keep us low. But again, like I said, sometimes, you know, emotional things are still going to happen to us. We're still going to study really hard on something and still get like a D, you know, or someone's going to break up with us, or they're going to, you know, or we're going to break up with them, or something like that. We're going to get into a fight with a friend. But the difference is that hopefully we'll only be up there like a short amount of time. Well, hopefully it would be more like this if we're emotionally regulated. But then we're just up there like a short amount of time, and then we can recover quicker, right? That's kind of our goal with that, is this. So there are times, you know, again, a lot of times we're asking, they want us to make this go away, and like this whole high level, and we just can't do that. Like again, our anxiety serves to motivate us, so if we are this high, it's to tell us something, and we need to listen to that, but just make sure that we're still moving towards our values, still making sure that we're living the life that we want with the anxiety. And so we're looking more for this kind of lower level, still possibly getting high in our ladder sometimes. So then the benefits, so that's emotion regulation. So the more regulated we are, basically the lower we'll be on our emotional scale. Now the benefits of tolerating distress is that then an individual with high tolerance to distress is able to be more flexible when triggers do come, especially the life-surprising triggers that happen. They'll be able to better manage unhealthy urges and then choose healthy alternatives. So they'll notice, oh, my mind, like my anxiety monster wants me to do this right now, wants me to like walk out of class, or wants me to throw away my homework, or whatever it might be. And because this is such a slower process, we're able to then be aware that we're going to do something different, something more healthy, something that does move us in our values. And then they'll be able to remain in situations that cause high anxiety instead of avoiding. So what we say in DBT a lot is that we want to survive the emotional distress, not avoid it. That's the kind of the difference for us, is that we want our kids and our adults and our programs to be able to survive any obstacle that comes in their way, versus trying to create this path of, you know, now I gotta go this way because something was anxiety-provoking or scary, and now I have to go this way. We want them just to be able to go straight. So then, so what then that's going to do, can you click the next one? Okay, just hold it for a second. So then, so just to kind of finish this drawing off, and so if let's say we've lowered our tolerance like way down to here, so if we've lowered our tolerance, the way we build it back up is to do the thing that's anxiety provoking. This is a lot of times where I get the eye rolls from the kids, because they're like, I'm sorry, what? What are you gonna do? And we have to talk to them about, we gotta get it back in there. Just like with that metaphor of, you know, if someone was afraid of heights, I can teach someone 2,000 skills. But if they don't start going up that elevator or climbing those stairs, we're never gonna get to the 100th floor, right? We need to move our bodies. And so the way we do that is that we just slowly build it back up. And so if this was the example we did before, where like speech is way up here, and now we're at the point where they're maybe saying they don't want to go to class, that's where we would start. So then, if the kid's right here, we would say, what do you think would be, you know, a little bit more then of not going to class at all? And it's like, maybe classes are 50 minutes, 25 minutes. So that's where we're gonna start. So we're gonna go right here. We're gonna go up just a tiny bit more than they were before. So we're gonna go, you know, 25 minutes of class. And then we're gonna go to the whole 50 minutes of class. And then maybe we'll set something up with a teacher that, you know, they ask a question that they know. And so then the teacher will ask the kid a question that they already know the answer to, so then they don't have that like as much fear of judgment. And then we just keep working it up to there. Then the kid, volunteers on their own in class. And then now it's time to do group work with one other person. And now it's time to do a 10-second speech or something like that. And we just keep building it up, like slower and slower, until then we get all the way back up to their tolerance. Make sense? And a lot of the times I can prove this to like 90% of our kids, because I'll always hear from the kids or the parents, like they used to be able to do this stuff. Like I know like in second, third, fourth, depending upon how old they are, if they're in high school, like I know that they did little like group work and speeches and stuff like that in grade school or junior high. And I'm like, I know your tolerance was higher. We have proof that it's higher because you once did all these things. And then something happened that we just slowly started to avoid until now we're not doing those things. So now we're going to talk about the skills to help us do this. And so first we're going to talk about the emotion regulation skills, which is the skills to help keep us low. Then we'll talk about the skills to bring us down if we're high. So the first ones are those emotion regulation skills. Feels more natural for me to be learning. And so again, emotion regulation skills are help keep us low. So then, what we're looking for, Linden defines like emotion regulation as being able to understand our emotions we experience and then hopefully decrease them, because again, we can't make them stop. And so it's more about decreasing how often it occurs, or like the intensity. It's helping us decrease emotional suffering. So we use that terminology a lot, is that we're like suffering. And then to reduce emotional vulnerability too, kind of that emotion that sneaks up on us. And so that like we are aware of kind of how our body's reacting to emotions and things like that. It's working again, I think. Maybe I just need to be on this side of the room. So, DBT, we love acronyms in DBT, and so there's a lot of them. And so our kind of classic emotion regulation grouping is strong. So as you're looking at these are probably nothing that surprises you. You might be like, I know all this stuff, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more related to anxiety and why it's important. So the acronym is STRONG. Love it, right? In order to keep us strong, to be emotionally regulated. So the first one is sleep hygiene. This is specifically to kids and teenagers. So adults, it's not quite the same. So the goal for kids and teenagers is to sleep 8 to 10 hours a night. How many of your kids are getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night? Nice. And so we're looking for that. I heard some grumbles that that's probably not happening. From the grumbles in the room. So when we're looking for sleep hygiene, it's really like at the end of the day, it's just how do you feel if you haven't slept good, right? We typically are like more reactive, we're typically more irritable, we might have problems with attention, concentration, we could have headaches, so those physical sensations that happen with anxiety could then also happen if we're not sleeping well. I personally get headaches when I don't sleep well. I can usually tell if I have like 3 nights, I have a 2-year-old, so I don't sleep so much anymore. But if I have about 3 nights in a row, I know like pretty much a headache's coming for me that I then need to figure out how to manage. So for a kid to a teenager, we should get about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. We recommend no napping. There's just not much good seems to come from it. A lot of times if we nap during the day, and most of the time kids don't nap anyway, they sleep during the day. Like if you're sleeping 2 or 3 hours, you're not taking a nap. You're just sleeping during the day. And so, but what we find a lot is that kids that are napping, or even adults, people that are napping during the day, then don't sleep as well at night. We just kind of general research shows that we don't want to do any screens like an hour before bed, because screens are stimulating to our brain. So whether it's video games, TV, phone. No exercise 3 hours before bed. And again, this isn't just me making it up, this is research. So no exercising if we can, like 3 hours before bed, because again, exercise is going to release those endorphins, which kind of gives you that pick-me-up. We don't want to pick me up right before bed. We want to limit caffeine and sugar after lunch. Research shows that caffeine stays in your system for about 12 hours. And so if you're having caffeine at 6, 7 o'clock at night, it's going to be in your system all night long. A bedtime routine is very helpful. It starts to just prepare the body. With my son right now, he has this routine. So we take a bath, and then he usually gets like a little bit of milk before bed. And it's funny because I start to think about these presentations like days in advance of, the wisdom I'm going to share. I'm just kidding. But last night we gave my son a bath earlier than normal because we had stuff going on. So he had his jammies on, and it was only like 6:30, typically goes to bed at 7:30, and he immediately went for his milk because he just knows. Even at 2 years old, he's aware. He takes a bath, he gets his jammies on, he goes and gets his milk. And even when I try to tell him, like, what, we're not going to sleep for like another hour, he's like, I get my milk at this time. So we just let him have his milk, So bedtime routines are so helpful because it just starts to wind the body down, especially if we've had a long day of class and sports and homework. It can just start to prepare us. And this is a tough one for kids, is that we want bed to be for sleep. So we can make connections. Our brain learns really fast. And so if we are doing homework in bed, if we're playing musical instruments in bed, if we're talking to our friends in bed, if we're, watching movies on our laptop in bed, then our brain starts to connect bed with fun stuff and activity versus sleeping. And so it's really the best that we can to have that bed be for sleep is very important. As well as, if after about 20 or 30 minutes of not sleeping, we want to get out of bed and do something that's non-stimulating. And so maybe read a magazine, just get a cup of water, something like that. Because again, we don't want to pair bed with frustration either. That every time, because things will happen that you're not even aware of. And so the minute you get into bed, you might feel restless just because if we're constantly feeling anxious in bed, that'll just become a new connection. It's a lot. I know, we know it's a lot. So a lot of the times, we just start with one thing, and so if we're struggling with all of these, we'll just say, what do you think is going to be the least, that's going to kind of interrupt or be the least, difficult? And we'll start there, and then we just add as we go. So then the T for strong is to treat physical illness. So just making sure that if we have any prescriptions, taking them as directed, being aware of any side effects, not taking other people's medicine, drinking plenty of fluids, resting, that's the difference between napping. And then, going to the doctor after 3 or 5 days of an illness. So this is just kind of the classic. But again, how do you feel if you don't feel good? Especially right now with our weather, right? When it's 10 degrees one day and 60 degrees the next, it totally messes with my head. It gives me sinus pressure and I just don't feel good, which is then going to make me more reactive. So then the R stands for resist mood-altering substances. A lot of people get stuck that they just want this to be about drugs and alcohol, but it's just not, it's not that simple. So we kind of split it into categories of what we want to limit versus what we want none of. So it's usually easier to say the none. Alcohol, energy drinks we put in the none, there is just no nutritional benefits from energy drinks. Drugs, nicotine, vaping, things like that, that's just a no category. And to be honest with you, we would say the same thing to our adults. When they're in our program because of anxiety, these are some of the first things to cut out to help us lower that anxiety. Caffeine, so things to limit, caffeine, sugar, pop, candy, desserts, kind of over-the-counter medications, things like that. A lot of these substances will actually mimic anxiety, so especially caffeine and sugar, might make people feel like their heart is racing, might make people feel like they're tingling. And so those are already symptoms that we're having if we're anxious. Then this is just going to add to it a little bit, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, You know, if you're already at a 4 and then you go to Starbucks and get something with a lot of caffeine, that might push you up to like a 6. We don't want to do that. So then once a day, this is one of my favorite skills. And so we want to make sure that once a day we're doing activities that we enjoy and that are meaningful. And so when people start to have chronic anxiety, this is a lot of times the first thing that people cut out, are like hobbies and interests, because their entire life starts to revolve around that anxiety and trying to make that anxiety go away. And so we want these activities to be fun. We want them to be value-based. We want them to be things that they enjoy. We want to be able to balance between what we call work and play. So even teenagers, work is going to school, doing homework, right? We want to make sure that it's balanced both ways. There's a lot of research that shows that we need that balance. So even if there's too much play and not enough work, that can cause us to be more dysregulated. That our brains actually want that work and play. It wants both. We want to be able to accumulate positive experiences, and so we say positive experiences because we can't just be happy, but we can certainly do experiences that typically bring us joy, you know? So we'll say things to our kiddos and our adults like, you know, they'll be like, there's no reason for me to go to my friend's party because there's going to be people there that I don't know, that's too anxiety-provoking, I won't have any fun. So we might say, well, but is that friend important to you? And they'll be like, yeah, I've been friends with them for a long time. So in order for you to maintain that friendship, what do you think we need to do? We need to go to the party, right? As long as it's a healthy party, of course. And then, you know, we'll say things like, you know, what do you think is going to happen if you know there's a party and you're just sitting at home that you're not there at? They're like, well, I'm probably going to feel anxious anyway because, right, they're not being there for their friend. So then we'll say, if you're going to feel anxious either way, we might as well go to the party because at least that way we're moving towards our values. That's going to make us more emotionally regulated. Moving towards our values and kind of telling that anxiety monster that my values are important to me and I'm going to move towards them whether you kind of like it or not. Because if the anxiety monster can get clever and try to trick you and make you think that your values aren't important. So they'll be like, well, I don't know if I'm really close to that friend anymore, or, you know, I'm sure like she has so many friends there that she's probably, you know, not even going to notice you. Like, you know, the anxiety monster will try to trick you to try to get you to stay home. Because the thing is about the anxiety monster only cares about you feeling comfortable. It doesn't care about your values. Those are two different areas of your brain. So where your anxiety is, down here is just worried about, are you anxious? And feeling comfortable. So let's say a kid's standing outside the school building and, you know, so anxious, having a panic attack, and let's say you have that kind of classic like angel devil thing with like the anxiety monster and then your values. You know, the anxiety monster will be like, I got this, just don't walk into that school, you'll be fine, you won't be anxious. So then you take a couple steps back and you're like, oh, that does make me feel better. And the anxiety slaps his hand and he's like, yep, I did that. And then the values are like, wait a minute, you know, like, but, you know, you want to be able to play that sport and your friends are in there and you want to be a vet someday, you know, and gosh, you're going to get into an argument with your parents tonight. And the anxiety monster's like, well, I don't care about any of that. I just care that Laura is comfortable, you know. But then what'll happen is this last one, this build mastery, to build a sense of accomplishment. If we're not doing that, there's a lot of research out there that shows that that is actually what decreases our self-worth, which is like self-esteem, self-confidence. And so to keep our self-esteem and confidence high, we need to build mastery, which is that idea of building a sense of accomplishment, which is doing things that are difficult. So we want to not only do things that are enjoyable, but we want to build mastery and do things that are fun and difficult, so learning activities. So a lot of times sports, like we want to increase our abilities there. And so then walking into that school building and doing things that are challenging is actually what increases self-esteem and self-worth. Because if we don't go and listen to that anxiety monster, then we start to believe what the anxiety monster says. I can't do anything. Where the values is over here being like, no, we want to do all these things. These are important to us. And so kind of balancing out, making sure that we're doing activities that are fun, but also building mastery. So it's okay that things are difficult. We want things to be difficult sometimes. Because life is difficult sometimes, right? So then nutrition. So kind of classic stuff, you know, so just following the food pyramid or my plate, making sure that we're eating like 3 full meals or 5 small meals. You know, making sure, especially if our anxiety really causes us to have a lack of attention or concentration, make sure we're eating protein, making sure that we have water intake. When we're dehydrated, which happens a lot, because you know, when we get anxious, we forget to do things. And if we're dehydrated or if we're hungry, that again is gonna spike some of those anxiety symptoms we were talking about earlier. And we wanna do the best we can to keep our anxiety number as low as possible. And so then if we're thirsty and we haven't eaten, or then we just grab an energy drink and a donut for breakfast, this is gonna affect our anxiety. It's gonna increase it. And then the last one is get exercise. So teenagers need about 60 minutes, or kids and teenagers need about 60 minutes of activity a day. You know, again, we want to engage in fun activities. We don't want it to feel like it's too much work. We want to make sure to stay hydrated, and then the exercises releases endorphins and increases mood and decreases stress. So again, I know these are all things that people have heard, but they're just so incredibly critical to anxiety. Because if I have, let's say I have a really busy schedule, my son's trying to potty train, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And so, little frustrated there sometimes. And so, I might be walking out the door. I haven't even interacted with anybody at work yet, or the traffic. I might be walking out the door at 4. I haven't done anything. It's simply because I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and I haven't gotten any exercise, right? And so the same thing can happen with kids, is that if they didn't sleep well because they stayed up too late, even if they were stayed up too late doing something fun, and then they don't eat breakfast, and they haven't exercised in a while or whatever out of these things, you know, then they're walking into school at a 4 or a 5 on their ladder. So then if something that is anxiety provoking, let's say a teacher says pop quiz, and that's gonna bring them up 3 points on their ladder, if they walked into school at a 5, now they're at an 8. They're in their crisis zone. So Linehan says the average crisis zone on a scale of 1 to 10 is 7 to 10. So if we're walking around at a 5 because we're dysregulated with these things, now we're up to an 8 and we're in our crisis zone. But if we can walk into school at 2, you know, just because we're making sure to do all these self-care items, then we're walking into that pop quiz at a 5. Way more manageable, right? And so that's why these things are so critical, is to make sure that we're getting these things. And these are the things that are not always so fun. But you'll start to see, you know, if you get to the point where we're practicing all of these things, they'll start to see, the kids will start to see yeah, I know now what you're talking about. So now distress tolerance. So distress tolerance, so emotion regulation is about keeping us low on our ladder. Distress tolerance is about bringing us down when we are high. So when those life experiences happen, we still get high on our anxiety ladder. You put me on a plane, I'm going up high on my ladder. It's just the way that it is. And so the idea of distress tolerance, though, is learning to bear pain skillfully. So it's to manage the stressful situations. Not to make the situations, you know, go away or to try to change the situation. It's more about us figuring out how to manage it. And so our goals are to move towards our values while carrying any discomforts with us lightly. We don't want it to be too heavy. Survive emotional situations. So again, instead of avoiding, actually making it through. Becoming free of that urge of I have to do this. We hear that a lot from our patients. I even have that. I have that thought sometimes too. I have to do X, Y, and Z. And then letting go of realities you cannot control. And so a mentor that I have with that, carrying things lightly, a metaphor of what to talk about, is that I don't really have anything very heavy. But what he's talked about is that, let's say this represents my pain, my anxiety, my discomfort. The difference between carrying it lightly is that if I'm carrying it very heavy, would be like, this is me taking my pain and like carrying it around like this. Like after a while, this is gonna hurt. This isn't even very heavy. But after a while, that's gonna hurt, right? Like my arm's gonna start to get heavy and I'm gonna start to do one of these. But carrying it lightly would be more like carrying it like this. My pain, my anxiety hasn't changed in any way, shape, or form. It's exactly the same. I'm doing something different to it, right? So the entire like 2 hours that I'm up here, like I could hold it like this the entire 2 hours. I could be a little flexible with it too, put it over there, bring it over here if I need to. But if I always have to carry it at an arm's length away from me, like that can't come anywhere near me, that's gonna cause me more suffering. Make sense? So we're trying to talk about carrying it lightly instead of trying to make it go away. So the skills. Thanks. So there's a lot. Like I could probably spend 3 hours just talking about distress tolerance skills and practicing them with you. So I just kind of picked out the ones that the kids enjoy the most. And so I did a version of this presentation at a different school, and when I did that version, I actually went in and asked the kids, like, what are your favorite ones? Because I can't teach everything. So tell me what your favorites are so then I can bring that to the parents. So this is what they picked. So we have distraction-based techniques, we have like self-soothing techniques, and then our crisis kit. So I know there's a lot of examples. I just want to give you as many examples as I can. So distraction-based techniques. So these are things that if someone was high on their emotional scale, and to be honest, you could use this for depression too, or anger. These are the same skills I would use for anyone struggling with those two. Is like activities. So activities that, it works when I don't want it to, and then it doesn't work. There we go. So like activities. So exercise, hobbies, games, doing like jumping jacks, jump rope, walking your dog, playing with animals, really any kind of activity that distracts you. So these are a little subjective because what would distract me might not distract you, so we need to figure that out. So like, what are your favorite activities that will distract you? So, and some of it depends too a little bit on what's happening in their body. So a lot of the times when people have panic attacks and like their heart is racing, they don't like the idea that their heart is racing for no reason. Like, I'm not doing anything to cause my heart to race. Like, why is it racing? So, all right, well, let's do an activity then to make that make sense for you. So we have to bring them in a room and like jumping jacks, and so like we'll do jumping jacks with them right then and there. Like, let's expend some of this energy. If you feel like your body's ramped up, because what happens is a lot of the times when we get higher on that emotional scale, when we get to like that 7, 8, 9, 10, that crisis zone, our body's going into fight or flight. You guys have all heard that, right? The fight or flight. So your body doesn't know, kind of back to the very beginning when we talked about the difference between anxiety and fear, your body doesn't always understand the difference. So if it doesn't know the difference, it's going to protect you and it's going to respond to everything is fear. So it's going to respond as if everything is life dangerous, because that emotion part of your brain doesn't know the difference between a mugger and a test. It just knows that you're uncomfortable and you don't want to be uncomfortable, and it's going to try to make you feel better. That part of your brain's more up here in your like executive functioning in your frontal lobe, that judgment, that insight to know what's happening. So it's two different areas of your brain. And so that emotional center is just like, you're saying something's wrong, I want to protect you. And so then it goes in this fight or flight. So what that then means is that it wants all the resources in your body to either go to like your legs and your arms to either literally run away or to start fighting, right? And so that's why all those physical sensations kind of rush, and why we get all of those physical sensations in the first place is because different areas in the body either stop working or need to overwork. So again, all the resources are going to get shifted to your arms and your legs to fight or to run away. So then things that are non-essential to survive emotional situations like that will stop. And so, for example, saliva production is not something that is critical to survive a dangerous, life-threatening situation. So you stop, which is why your mouth gets dry sometimes if you're anxious. And then if your mouth is dry, it can be hard to swallow, which then can make you feel like you're choking or make you feel like you can't breathe as well because there's not that saliva, right? Your body doesn't need to digest if there's gut mugger. So it stops digesting. So this is where stomach aches come into play. This is where diarrhea can come into play. Because if your body stops the digestion, it's like just going to then eliminate whatever's happening right then, or it's going to store it, and then that can cause constipation. So all of these kind of things, like there's a reason for almost every physical sensation, they're just all different. The reason why people a lot of times get like blurry vision is because your eyes dilate, because it thinks it needs to see better. But when you're sitting in the middle of class, there's nothing to see better, so then it just ends up feeling blurry. But if you were in that dark alley and someone was chasing you, you would want to see better. Does that all make sense? So there's a reason for everything. It's just all different reasons for everything, which is then why we need to try to distract ourselves from that. We need to distract that anxiety part of our brain so that it's not getting so deep into this fight or flight mode. Contributing is another way we can distract ourselves so we can focus on someone else instead of focusing on me. So I could like maybe play with my dogs, take them for a walk. I could call my grandma, talk about her, what's happening with her lately. We could babysit, we could cook or bake, we could do a chore, we could organize. Organization always helps me. Kids usually don't like that one as much though. Make a gift, things like that. Thoughts, this is probably the kids' favorite, is thoughts. So these are kind of mentally stimulating things that take a lot of time. So things like word searches, Sudoku, crosswords, counting backwards by like 3, 7, 13, that's hard to do. Playing 20 questions, playing I Spy, extreme connect the dot pages, hidden pictures. Those are things that take a lot of mental effort. And so then it's going to be harder for the anxiety monster to talk to you if we're doing something like this. The ABC game, that's just a game that's been made up. It's not really a DBT one. But the ABC game is where you just take a theme and then try to have pick items in that theme to go along the alphabet. So if I was to do like stores, you could do like Apple, Banana Republic, like things like Cabela's, so you just kind of go through the alphabet. I think one of the reasons that the kids like it so much is because there's such a big variation. So I could do it by myself, right? I could just right now go through everything. I could make it more concrete if I needed to and write it on a piece of paper, just A to Z, and then just fill it in as I'm thinking of things. If I was at school and struggling, I could go down to my social worker's office, we could do it together. I do A, they do B, I do C, they do, we just go back and forth. Families can even do it, 4 people can play, things like that. Shock the senses is another way we can distract ourselves. And so, like taking like a cold shower is something that can really distract us. Spicy food or like certain smells. Like cinnamon's a fairly strong smell, things like that, optical illusions. So even like the hidden pictures a lot of times would fit in the shock the senses. Imagery, and so relaxing scenes can be distracting. So this one we like because we don't necessarily have to like leave the classroom or leave wherever the anxiety-provoking thing is, and we can just sort of take like a quick mental break. And so imagining certain things, like imagery for me, like I've pretty much seen every episode of The Office like 3 times, so I could like imagine all the ways that like Jim has pranked Dwight, and that would probably bring a smile to my face. And like things like we can get creative with it, things like that. So self-soothe with your 5 senses. So this is, again, just taking your 5 senses, and then what are things that are soothing? Because it's all about bringing you down your emotional scale. And so if I was higher on my ladder, you know, like looking through, I scrapbook, so maybe like going back and looking through my scrapbooks. Yes? Lots of ways. I'm going to show you my crisis kit. But like in my crisis kit, I have pictures of my dogs, so I could like look at pictures of my dogs. I could put, if there's a certain flower that I like I could put a flower in my crisis kit. I could even think about things. And so some of them can't be done in the middle of class, but if we could take a 10-minute break from class and go take a break, practice a skill, and then get back to class, a lot of the times that's more helpful than a lot of, like, our kiddos have a tendency to leave class and never return, or even refuse to go to school for the day. And so, so we can just take like a small break to do it. So hearing, so like listening to like soothing music or like sounds of nature. I could imagine certain things, or audiobooks is a way to do that. So a lot of times we'll suggest to the kids to make like a playlist, or tell their social worker or guidance counselor, whoever their main contact is, of like 2 or 3 of their favorite songs. And then just depending upon what kind of situations are set up at the school, like if they did need to take like that 5-minute break, just because they have a test coming or something happened in class that they weren't expecting and they're high on their ladder. And we typically suggest practicing 5 skills first, then taking that break if they need to go see like a guidance counselor or social worker, whoever it is. So we would want them to practice 5 skills on their own, and then go down to their support staff to say, I practiced these 5 skills, my anxiety is still in the crisis zone. And then, you know, like, just depending upon the resources, every school's a little different on how things work, especially like grade schools have a tendency to be able to take a little bit more time for things. So like in my private practice, I have a little one, and we kind of set that up, and so then the social worker knows what her favorite song is, and they'll do like a quick little dance party for like 3.5 minutes, and they'll just like go down and do a dance party, and then they go back to class. Because the song itself is soothing to her, as well as then just like dancing it out for 3.5 minutes can then, you know, help distract her, get some of that energy out that anxiety monster is giving her. And then she goes back to class. Smell, there's a lot of research out there that shows that smell can be very helpful with decreasing intense emotions. And so things that can, you know, happen in school could be like your favorite smelling lotion, you know, things like that. You know, like sprays or like baking, you know, so if, you know, let's say something's happening that you're doing homework and they're starting to have like a panic attack, you know, maybe taking a few minute break to like just bake something real quick, or, you know, to put a certain wax melts or something like that could be helpful. Taste, so like favorite meals, soothing drinks, maybe some gum, mints, hard candy. One of the things that's important with all of these is to do it mindfully. I know we didn't talk about that word, but mindfully is just like really paying attention. So, you know, if I had lotion and it was like a lavender scent, which, you know, is supposed to be very relaxing, but I could worry that someone's gonna ask me a question that I can't answer as I'm like just putting lotion on, right? Like, you have to purposely direct your attention when you're doing any sort of skill, no matter what it is, and give 100% of your attention to that activity. So as you're putting like the lotion on, really like smelling it, noticing how your skin is starting to like glisten from the lotion, looking how it feels. You know, like as you're starting to rub in the lotion, how like that part of your skin is starting to feel softer. You know, so it's really about paying attention and increasing your awareness and doing it on purpose. And then touch. So This is anything from, you know, bubble baths to petting animals, to the lotion part we talked about. Cold compresses seem to help a lot. It surprises me how often kids like that, because again, I just think when we get anxious, a lot of us get hot. So then just putting like a cold rag or a quick ice pack on our neck or on our forehead just to kind of help cool our body down. A lot of people have like, you know, fidget spinners these days, which a lot of them have been banned at schools, but you know, fidget spinner, fidget cubes, you know, the clay stuff that's going on right now, all of those would fit in this arena. So then the crisis kit. So there's lots of different terminology for this. A crisis kit, a skills kit, a self-soothe kit, whatever word would be helpful. We once had a kid call it the chaos kit because it's like when he was in chaos. So these are just things, this is a little bit more geared towards school. So we often recommend making like 2 of them. So making a smaller travel one for school, and then possibly having like a bigger one at home. In the very beginning, when we first opened the program like 9 years ago, we weren't as like defined on what we were telling the kids, just because we were learning ourselves. And so they would go to school and then we would get like a call from, because we're transitioning the kid, and like their social worker would call and say, Johnny was really able to come up with some good skills. However, he wants to play basketball, and he wants to pet his dog, and he wants to take a cold shower, and he wants to watch his favorite episode of Paw Patrol. And we're like, ugh. So we really want to make sure that we have 2 crisis skills, one for at home, and then one for school. So putting, and a lot of this stuff you can just get online too. So at Linden, we have like a file drawer, and it has like a file of crosswords, a file of word searches, a file of Sudoku, extreme dots, hidden pictures. So that if the kid is struggling during our group, they can just go grab one, use it. Now these are the accommodations we don't mind so much, right? That hopefully we can get accommodation from the school, because our goal is to keep that kid in class, right? So if we can sneak out like one word search and complete it in the middle of class so that we can stay in class, ride out that emotional wave and kind of get back into gear, that would be helpful. Some of the things that we've done in the past is that we've talked with the school and the teachers about creating kind of a signal. And so we'll take like an index card, and one side will be green and one side will be red. And if it's red, then that means I'm struggling, I'm higher on my ladder, and I'm practicing a skill. And then if it's green, that shows we're doing okay, you can call on me, I'll answer questions. And that seems to help, and it's discreet. It's not like it's rah, 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 like this kid's struggling. And so like we've done little things like that before, just to kind of signal to the teacher that I need to practice some skills. Now, of course, if it's red all the time, every day, we're gonna have to talk about that a little bit, and then increase that tolerance to being able to be in class. I didn't realize how small that was actually until I got away from it. I apologize if people on the way back can't see the pictures as well. So we have kind of 2 parts to the crisis kit. One is the objects, and then 2 is an index card of the non-object related skills. So these are things, because when we're high on our emotional ladder, I promise you will not remember a single skill. Because when we're high on a ladder, it's just that rational mind part is just not there. So we need to have like a trigger to us to remember these things. So anything from breathing exercises could be on there. Observing thoughts just means that we don't have to do what our mind says or what our anxiety monster says. That it's just sort of like, hey, I noticed my mind saying I should leave the room right now. I don't have to follow that. That's just a suggestion that my anxiety is giving me, and I don't have to listen to it. And a lot of the times, because of that fight or flight system, we just think we have to listen to it to protect ourselves. But a lot of the times we talk with our kids about, and our adults too, of what, but is this life-threatening? Is what's happening right now life-threatening? Is it an actual fear response? Or is it anxiety, which is then our, mind worried that something bad is going to happen? So that's what the observe, we want to remind ourselves to observe our thoughts, like watch them, versus listen to them and do everything that they say. Maybe like to be gentle with others. A lot of times as we get higher in our anxiety ladder, we get a little demanding, and so it's about like being gentle. Again, just remembering that ABC game, because we won't remember that. 20 questions, I Spy, tic-tac-toe. Those are all things that we can play with our social worker, guidance counselor if we need to. Like the counting backwards, reminding ourselves to do exercise, imagining the certain scenes. Like YouTube videos of animals and babies, like if that's not going to make you smile, I don't know what will. Maybe even just watching, like again, like I could Google, like because of Google these days, like there's a Google out there of like Jim pranking Dwight from The Office, and it's probably like 6 minutes, and I could watch that real quick and distract myself and hopefully bring down my anxiety ladder. Notice 5 things with your senses. That's just, notice 5 things is the name of the skill. It's just taking that self-soothe that we talked about before, but just doing one of each. So, notice 5 things I could, noticing one thing that I could see. And I might pick something, I've never been in here before this, so I might even pick something, that I haven't even looked at. And like really kind of describe it. What's one thing that I can touch, what's one thing I can smell, and just kind of do it that way. And then cook, bake, and eat mindfully. So I brought mine. I'm going to show you guys. It's going to be hard. I feel like I'm going to drop it. So even my bag, I try to make it real. So I know you guys don't know me, but just to give you like a 2-minute background, I had separation anxiety, especially from my mom, but a good chunk of my family when I was in 5th grade. And so I refused to go to school and kind of did that thing and went to therapy. And so then, fast forward, and I'm working at Linden Oaks, doing my postdoctoral fellowship on inpatient, and then started working with some kids with anxiety. It just so happened that then the anxiety program opened. And so I tried to make the program what like my little 5th grade self needed, because we didn't have these kind of things when I was at that age. And so this is like this is what I would really use. Like, it's not a prop. So even my bag itself is like super colorful and pretty. So I like that. I used to have little like danglies, and they all fell off, which is sad for me. But so even my bag itself, because something that I could do with just this bag is that I would like play with the circles, like, because this would be touch itself, right? Because there's so many skills out there that we have on our person that we don't even realize. So I could like play with the zippers, that would be fun for me. I could play with this. I could be mindful of the colors and be like yellow, orange, purple, that kind of stuff. All right, so here we go. So I have word searches. Crosswords are too hard for me when I'm anxious. I just get frustrated. And so now I feel anxious and frustrated, and that's not helpful. So I have crosswords. I like crosswords because I can be really concrete, and if I need to, I can be like F, L, J, like help myself. I get really hot when I get anxious, and so I have these like refreshing body cloths that are just supposed to be like cooling, so I can put one like on the back of my neck, or just kind of wipe my face off if I was feeling too anxious. Sometimes my hair is like a blanket when I get anxious. So I have for the soothing part, I have M&Ms because I can like just eat them one at a time, and if I really want to get mindful, I would let the M&M like melt away versus chewing it, right? It's going to take me a while to do that, right? So then my shock the senses is Sour Patch Kids. So see the difference between like soothing and shocking? So I have lotion, It's just like an orangey smell. I like orange. Like hand sanitizer. Because I get like hot, and especially now that I'm older, like people want to shake my hand, and like I feel sweaty sometimes, so it helps me to have the hand sanitizer. I have a deck of cards for a few reasons. One, because it's a quick way that I can play a game with someone if I need to, as well as I want to represent, like, some schools you can't use your phone, so we can't always play games. So we have to go old school and like play solitaire or speed or something like that. Or you could shuffle. I mean, you couldn't do that in the middle of class, but even shuffling is like a good touch. Things like that. I have gum. I have a tendency to like bite my lips, and I don't want to do that when I'm anxious, so like gum is helpful for me for that. Just because of my presentation, I brought a flash drive. Not that I didn't trust you, Tim, but just in case my anxiety was like, maybe bring a copy just in case. I have at Linden Oaks, you get a little party prize if you come to one of our programs, and so you get a bendy stick. So I have that, because I can just bend it. Our kids, it's funny, when they come to us, they're like perfectly straight, right, Christine? Perfectly straight. And you can never get it perfectly straight again. And so it's like this game that the kids and I play. Like that one of us will get it straight once again, but it never happens. I have paper and pen. So even my pen has paw prints because I love animals. So it just kind of reminds me of that. And then just paper, I could doodle with it. I could make a to-do list if I needed to, if I started feeling like overwhelmed because I had too much to do. I can make a to-do list. I have mints, but they're Altoids, so they're a little bit more intense. I have, it's like Mary Poppins bag, I know. I have silly putty. I hate Play-Doh, it's sticky and it gets everywhere, so silly putty. So I can like play with it. And one of the reasons I like silly putty too is because it's so small that it's not like this big thing. Like I could probably have that in my hands and you wouldn't know. I have this stone. It's like one of those like thumbprint stones, but at the same time, it was given to me by a patient once when they were discharging just to say thank you. It says peace on it, and because they said that I gave them more peace. I mean, how adorable is that? So I think about that every time. So not only is like this helpful for me just to have in my hands, because I have a tendency to, you know, just be like jittery and like tremble a little bit, so that if I have something in my hands, it's helpful. And then I have a Sudoku page. Because again, sometimes in the middle of class, we don't want to bring out one of those big old mandala books. You know, those are like this thick. So we can just kind of discreetly take out one piece of paper. As well, it's free on the internet, so that's nice. And then I wanted to show you what an extreme dot to dot looks like, so I don't know if you guys know. So this is an extreme dot to dot. It has like 1,000 dots on it. So like, you're not going to know what that picture is until you actually draw it. Funny story, not really funny. We don't know what's on them, and it ended up being a clown, and our patient was afraid of clowns. And she thought I did it on purpose, and I swore that I didn't, and I didn't for real either. And sure enough, it was a clown of all things. So now I know I have a little mark on that one because I know it's a clown. I have pictures of my dogs because they make me happy. I haven't updated this in a while, so my son's not in there. Sorry, guys. And then last but not least, I have my index card of my favorite skills. And so it has YouTube videos of puppies and babies. It's got that on there for sure. One of the things that I like to do, that the kids will giggle at me at sometimes, but I like to imagine how I would redecorate a room I'm in. So if I'm like somewhere and I think, how would I decorate this auditorium? Like, I just think it's fun. It's like a little bit of a hobby for me. So that's everything. So see how it's very small? I could absolutely bring that to school. I could, keep it in my book bag. I could just pull things out if I needed to. Some things I could hide with my hands if I needed to. Stuff like that. Now that I've gotten older, you know, a little bit, like, it's not as to have, like, well, at Linden we would have bendy sticks and it wouldn't be a big deal, but, you know, like, there's creative ways you can do it too, like, if you're older and you're anxious, like, paper clips is an example. You know, like how paper clips you can kind of bend, and, like, for a paper clip to be, like, in some sort of, like, board meeting, that's not weird, you know, and so you can easily have, like, something like that too if you're older. So that's kind of the end. So here's a couple books. These are workbooks, so they're not kind of like, I mean, they're educational, of course, but the idea is that you kind of, they're all worksheets, they're all ways to work through different exercises. So everything that we talked about today is going to be helpful. So these are good ones. These are my 3 top favorites. The How to Build Self-Compassion workbook is good. You know, that's a way to increase that self-worth. These are books for parents, so these are more like textbooky. They're pretty short though, so they're quick reads. So just how to like parent your anxious child with mindfulness and acceptance, because again, we're trying to work on accepting, you know, the emotions versus trying to make them go away. Parenting, the last 2 are similar, just parenting a child who has intense emotions than parenting a teen. And then just some information. So our assessment and referral center is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're ever interested in having your child get assessed or looking for any kind of referrals or resources in the area, it's free to call and it's free to get an assessment. Our marketing department phone number for anyone if you want any more like presentations or anything. And then my email. A lot of the times when I do these presentations, I get rushed with emails. So if you could please just be patient with me. If you send me an email, you can give me a few days to write back. Because sometimes I'll get like a dozen emails in a day, and it's just hard for me to do all that at once.